Welcome back to Politics Nation. I totally got stuck in Los Angeles traffic, and there was an accident ahead of us. I ran ahead and said, look, I got to get to the studio. I have a date with Rachel Maddow. They said, Rachel Maddow, and they rushed me around some kind of way, so I made it. Because when a political story goes so deep that even I'm at a loss, and I'm lost in the weeds, I turn to my colleague, Rachel Maddow. Every Monday at 9, tune in to MSNBC for her insight to her show and her insight, and to her podcast, Ultra, to better understand the world around us, because that's what I do to understand the world around me. And as the country prepares for another election year, her new book out this week, Prequel, An American Fight Against Fascism, offers a lens to view the current political landscape in the United States by tracing back the history of American democracy, parallel to global fascism. Rachel Maddow joins me now. I am delighted to have you here and that I got here to be able to have this date. Thank you for coming on the show today, Rachel.
Of course. I don't think that my name has ever been used to get around traffic or around an accident with police officers ever before. So if you did it, you win some sort of world record or something for that, Al. If anybody could do it, it would be you.
I'll take that. Before we dive into your book, I want to get your thoughts on the war in Israel. In the past 24 hours, we've had at least a few hopeful signs with the delivery of humanitarian aid to Gaza today for the first time, really, since the conflict started, and the release of 2 American hostages. We have a lot more to go, but we had 2 released yesterday by Hamas. What have been your thoughts as you've covered these historic events over the past few weeks?
Well, it's been, I mean, as you know, as all of us know, it is an impossible story. It is just morally so difficult. It's something that I think all of us feel a lot of emotion covering. The terrorist attacks were so sadistic and so cruel, and the fact that people are still being held, and the fear and the terror and what we know is the treatment of some of the people who we know how they were treated in that terrorist attack. It's just overwhelming. I don't even think we can absorb it. And we are also very, very, very concerned at the death toll in Gaza and at what may lay ahead in terms of whether civilians can get out of the impossible position they're in, can get to safety. It's just, it's morally overwhelming. And there's also this big problem of disinformation, Rev, as you know, that there's so much propaganda and disinformation being circulated that it makes, for those of us who work for, established news organizations with literally standards departments that control our sourcing and the way that we're able to talk about things, with commitments to run corrections when we get things wrong, which everybody inevitably does. It just makes it all the more important for those of us at big news organizations to make sure that we're providing credible information as best we can in a sea of disinformation that's out there. So it's just really hard. On the other hand, the glimmers of at least positive movement that we have had, seeing those 20 trucks cross through the Rafah crossing from Egypt into Gaza, feels like it's a drop of water in the ocean, but it is at least a drop of water. And to have those 2 hostages released, well, there's still 200 more to go, but 2 released is the first. And so I just pray that in both of those instances, that's the start of something much more significant and much larger along those same lines.
Yeah, a drop of water, I think, is a right way to say, but it is a drop of water. And you and I both mourn the civilians killed in Israel and those suffering and killed in Gaza. I mean, we cannot not deal with both. But let's switch gears now to your book, Prequel. It's a look at how America fought against fascism, not only overseas, but here at home, at a time when it wasn't a sure thing that democracy would come out on top. What drove you, first of all, to write this book?
Rev, I was interested in the sort of rise of Trumpism, this variety of the right wing that we've got ascendant right now in conservative politics, I was interested in just something that seemed like very much an open question to me, did not seem to have an open answer, which is, why are we seeing this type of kind of ultra-right ascendance in conservative and Republican politics, alongside a big upsurge in anti-Semitism, and particularly in Holocaust denial. Like, why? It's always been such a bizarre, toxic thing to me, but just strange in addition to being bad. And so I started looking into the origins of American Holocaust denial and American, very robust anti-Semitism, and how it has linked to right-wing groups and to American politics broadly in the past. And I really didn't intend to tell this story, but I stumbled on this story of dozens of Americans being put on trial for sedition, for allegedly trying to violently overthrow the U.S. government in a conspiracy with Nazi Germany. And it was all these paramilitary groups, and it was some of the most influential people in the country, both in Congress and just in the culture and in business, who were involved with it. And it was a story that I'd never learned. And as soon as I got that far, I realized, oh, this is the story I need to tell. That led to the Ultra podcast, and that then has led to this book, which is about American fascism as we were gearing up to fight the Nazis. These were the Americans who wanted us not to fight the Nazis, or who in fact themselves worked for the Nazis, who were trying to bring about an American form of Nazism here.
A lot of Americans associate modern-day fascism with Trumpism, and you mentioned Trump. And this week, the former president and current Republican frontrunner, by the way, was fined by a judge for trashing a law clerk online. Trump has tried to undermine the institution of the courts during his various trials, just as subverted the Justice Department and the media, while the president and even the election. In your view, are these the tactics of a fascist?
It's a very good question, and I feel like a lot of people get their hackles up when you apply terms that we're more comfortable using in a historical context, or terms that we're more comfortable using about other countries, to our modern politics today. I mean, certainly when it comes to Nazism, there's no analogy at all. Nobody is Hitler but Hitler. Nobody are the Nazis but the Nazis. There's no modern analogy to that whatsoever. But fascism and authoritarianism are ideological concepts that have applied in lots of other countries and at other times in American history. And I sort of feel like your mileage may vary as to whether or not that's the word that you want to apply here. But authoritarianism always has the same tactics. They bring violence to bear on the political process, so it kind of squeezes normal people out of politics because they get intimidated. They use scapegoating and crazy conspiracy theories about minorities, particularly about Jews, to make us think that there's some secret cabal who's controlling everything and we need a strong man to lead us. They tell us not to believe journalism, not to believe science, not to believe experts, just believe what the leader tells you. You can't trust anything else. And they make it so it seems like our democracy doesn't work, that they make it so your vote doesn't count, or you believe your vote doesn't count, or you believe all voting is rigged. And if you start getting all those four factors together, you sort of call it whatever you want, but we've seen it happen in country after country after country in the 20th and 21st centuries. And we know that it leads toward abandoning democracy and installing a strong man instead. And I don't think, whatever you call it, I don't think anybody would argue that that is the model that Trump is offering to the United States. I alone can fix it. The press is the enemy of the people. Congress should work for me. The Justice Department should work for me to reward my friends and punish my enemies. Business should work for me. I mean, those are all the hallmarks of a strongman leader. It's easier for us to see it abroad, but we should also see it in our own history.
Now, what Trump is while he's sowing chaos outside of government, in Congress, far-right members of the Republican Party have brought the work of the House of Representatives to a halt by forcing out Speaker McCarthy and triggering a leadership crisis that still hasn't been resolved. Is this legislative dysfunction perhaps also a symptom of something more troubling under the surface of our politics right now?
It is a very good question and very well put. I am troubled about this because on the one hand, there's a way to look at this with a sort of cynical, like I've seen it all news person view, right? Which is, oh, the Republicans are in disarray. You get a little Schadenfreude. You get a little like, oh, these guys, couldn't fight their way out of a paper bag. You get the, it's easy to see it in those terms. And maybe that is all this is. They've had almost every Republican speaker in my lifetime has either ended in disgrace or scandal or some sort of chaos. It happens. On the other hand, we've got rising authoritarianism around the world, right? We've got, when President Biden went to go visit the region of the Israel-Hamas conflict, when he went to Israel this week to go shore up our allies and try to rally the world, came home, tried to rally the world to support Ukraine and to support Israel in this fight against Hamas, this terrorist group, and to have compassion for the people of Gaza. While President Biden was doing that, Vladimir Putin was in China meeting with Viktor Orban. And so they're being, Xi is greeting them. He's president for life, or he's the leader for life. Putin is in his 24th year of power. Viktor Orban is in his 14th year of power. None of those guys ever plan on relinquishing power in their lifetimes, right? There's no such thing as an ex-dictator. That's a job title that doesn't exist. So you have this real pressure around the world to get rid of democracy, to get rid of anything other than the singular leader being in charge. And here, while that's all happening, our Congress, it might look funny, but we effectively don't have a House of Representatives anymore. And one thing that happens in strongman rule is that you have a legislature that becomes Potemkin, that becomes pointless. It's just decoration. It's not really there to function and do anything in government. And the closer we get to that, the closer we get to a form of government, which is not what we're supposed to have, which is not what our Constitution lays out.
Last question, and I might say that I'm told it was a stall car, not an accident, but I'm glad that all of the fellas helped me get around it to keep this date with you. You wrote in your book, and I have a copy of your book. You were kind enough to get it in my office at 30 Rock, as you promised me you would.
Yes,
so in your book, you talk about the warning signs of fascism, and it does seem as though some of these signs are flashing red right now. How concerned are you about these trends, and what can be done to push back, Rachel?
Well, I feel like the first thing we need to do is recognize the threat and get real about it, and recognize that, as the phrase goes, it can happen here. I also think, for me, everybody likes to learn about these things in different ways. For me, it's helpful to learn history. For me, it's helpful to learn the stories of Americans when they were up against a fascist movement in the 1930s and 1940s in this country that wanted a Hitler-style government here, that wanted to overthrow the U.S. government by force, that was working with the Nazis. 24 members of Congress were involved with a Nazi agent propagandizing the American people against our democracy. When Americans stood up against that, they did amazing things. They infiltrated those groups. There was incredible journalism exposing what they did. There were powerful forces that were trying to stop the Justice Department from going after these guys and prosecuting them for crimes, but there were brave prosecutors who nevertheless stood up against those forces and brought criminal cases. It all has to happen. Journalists and activists and regular citizens, and yes, the government, all have to work on this all at once. There's no silver bullet. We just need to take it seriously as a country, and maybe with this history, learn how other Americans have faced it before us.
Well, let me thank my dear colleague, and I might say we were dear colleagues before either one of us had an MSNBC show.
That's right.
My dear colleague, Rachel Maddow. Thank you, Rachel, for being with us.